Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a fascinating journey right through the looking glass. We're going to explore the hidden Victorian satire baked into Lewis Carroll's famous sequel, and we'll be unraveling the incredibly complex life of the man who actually wrote it. If you think you know the story of Alice, well, prepare to see it in a totally different light.
So what if the ultimate children's fairy tale was actually a brutal takedown of Victorian society? It's a pretty provocative thought, right? I mean, we've all grown up with the idea that Alice's adventures are just this sweet, whimsical piece of innocent nonsense. But as you'll see, the source material suggests something much sharper and much more intentional is lurking right beneath the surface.
To anchor our exploration, let's look at a recent analysis from the New Literaria Journal. They argue that the novel is actually, quote, a parody of Victorian ways and values, thereby questioning the contradictions inherent in them. So we are officially peeling back those whimsical, nonsensical layers to reveal a very sharp, very deliberate societal critique.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it grounds our entire discussion. We aren't just guessing here, right? We're drawing directly from rigorous, peer-reviewed analysis that treats Alice not just as a children's character, but as a magnifying glass, a lens through which we can really scrutinize the 19th century. So let's deconstruct exactly how the author pulled this off.
The journal frames Through the Looking Glass as a Bildungsroman. Basically, that's a novel dealing with one person's formative years or spiritual education. In this reading, Alice acts as a Victorian middle-class heroine. She enters the looking glass world as a completely powerless white pawn, and she has to navigate this harsh, super confusing adult world to eventually mature into a queen.
So what exactly is Alice fighting against on this journey? Well, the analysis breaks Carroll's satire down into three main targets. First up, the bleak world of industrialization and mechanization. Second, the sheer mindlessness of arbitrary social etiquette. And third, the Victorian imperialist project. To survive a world that's spinning completely out of control, Alice basically resorts to clinging to rules and nervously murmuring her school lessons. This brings us to one of the absolute most famous lines in the book. The Red Queen tells Alice, "It takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place." This is such a brilliant illustration of the dizzying, disorienting pace of Victorian industrialization and early capitalist exploitation. The Victorians felt totally disconnected and unmoored by all these rapid societal changes. Honestly, think of it as the 19th century equivalent of modern hustle culture burnout. That existential exhaustion is perfectly mirrored by Alice having to run endlessly on a giant chessboard.
Our source also draws a really fascinating contrast between the two Alice books. While Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is mostly characterized by random, rule-free movement, Through the Looking Glass operates entirely differently. It's a rigid, deterministic, math-based world driven by backward logic. Alice is quite literally moving across a chessboard, governed by these strict laws she doesn't fully understand, but is absolutely forced to follow.
And speaking of rules she's forced to follow, let's look at how the book exposes the pure absurdity of Victorian etiquette. Remember when Alice meets Tweedledee and Tweedledum? She ends up shaking both of their hands simultaneously, simply to avoid accidentally offending one of them. The source points out that this hilarious, bizarre little encounter actually exposes the constraints and total mindlessness of the strict social habits that Victorian girls were rigorously schooled into.
Let's move to who and see how this builds into an understanding of the man himself. On one side, we have Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, an Oxford mathematician, a master of logic, and an ordained Anglican deacon. But on the other side, we have his famous pen name, Lewis Carroll, the creator of literary nonsense, whimsical poetry, and fairy tales. It's like two entirely different people in one.
That duality is absolutely vital to understanding his writing. The source stresses that literary nonsense isn't just gibberish devoid of meaning. Actually, it's a carefully structured, conscious subversion of language and logic. Think about it. It really takes the methodical, brilliant mind of a master logician like Dodgson to subvert rationality so perfectly.
Dodgson's playful, mathematical mind extended way beyond his books, too. He loved puzzles. He even created a word ladder game for Vanity Fair magazine, which he called a doublet. Basically, you change one letter at a time to create a new word. Step 1, cat. Step 2, caught. Step 3, dot. Step 4, dog. It's a perfect illustration of how his brain was constantly hunting for patterns, rules, and linguistic transformations.
And his inventive mind certainly didn't stop at games. Dodgson actually created a bunch of real-world inventions. Take the nyctograph, for example. It was a device with a gridded card and a special alphabet that let him take notes in the dark without even getting out of bed. Pretty clever, right? He also invented the Wonderland postage stamp case to organize stationery. He even proposed early, highly sophisticated mathematical systems for proportional representation in parliamentary voting. His mind was just constantly bridging the gap between rigorous math and daily life.
Now, shifting gears a bit, we do need to address that Dodgson's personal life has become a subject of intense scrutiny over the years. The controversies surrounding him have evolved dramatically, starting with a historical mystery in 1863 regarding some missing diary pages. Then, moving into the 1930s, Freudian psychoanalysis began aggressively interpreting his work and his life, and finally arriving at the modern era, notably with a 2015 BBC documentary that sparked massive headlines.
A really significant part of this controversy stems from his hobby as an amateur photographer. There are two primary historical perspectives on this presented in our sources. On the one hand, biographers like Morton Cohen and the makers of the BBC documentary allege an inappropriate erotic interest, pointing to his photographs of nude or semi-nude children. On the other hand, scholars like Edward Wakeling and Caroline Leach vehemently refute this. They place the photos strictly within the historical context of the Victorian child cult, arguing that childhood nudity was a mainstream aesthetic expression of innocence, widely practiced by prominent photographers of that specific era.
The debate really reignited sharply with that 2015 BBC documentary. The filmmakers presented a photograph found at the Musée Contini in France, claiming it depicted a nude Lorena Liddell, that's Alice's older sister, and attributed it to L. Carroll based on a pencil inscription on the back. However, Carroll scholars immediately raised factual contradictions. They noted the photo lacks Dodgson's meticulous personal catalog numbers, it's irregularly trimmed, and the handwriting on the back is from an unknown source, so that cast heavy scholarly doubt on its authenticity.
Alongside the photography debate is another deep historical mystery, and that has to do with his diaries. Several pages from his journals were literally removed by an unknown hand, most notably the entry for June 27, 1863. This missing date directly surrounds the sudden, totally unexplained break in Dodgson's really close relationship with the Liddell family. For decades, Freudian theories assume those missing pages covered up a scandalous proposal to 11-year-old Alice Liddell.
But interestingly enough, archival evidence challenges that popular myth. Scholar Caroline Leach discovered a document in the Dodgson family archive that actually summarizes those missing pages. According to this document, the rift was caused by gossip circulating about Dodgson, the Liddell family's governess, and Ina, which presumably refers to Alice's older sister or even her mother, Lorena. The critical takeaway from the sources here is that the document implies the break might not have been connected to Alice at all.
Let's transition from his personal relationships to his physical reality. So, the crucial point is how Dodgson's own health might have heavily influenced his writing. He recorded experiencing migraines with auras that he described as moving fortifications, and he suffered spells diagnosed at the time as epileptiform seizures. Some authors even suggest he may have experienced micropsia and macropsia. That's a neurological condition that distorts the perceived size of objects. Get this, today this is literally known in medicine as Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So it's entirely possible his physical ailments literally shaped the surreal, size-shifting world of his literature.
So what does this all mean? We are left with a final thought to ponder. How does our modern lens shape our understanding of historical figures? And where exactly is the line between innocent nonsense and harsh reality? From the rigorous satires of Victorian industrialism hidden inside a chess game to the complex debates over his photography and his health, Lewis Carroll's legacy proves that the world behind the looking glass is just as intricate, baffling, and fascinating as our own. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.